My name is Rabbi Pilichowski, and I want to thank you all for hosting and University of UC Berkeley. And I want to thank Natan and everybody that's involved in Tikva. It's not easy having different and divergent views, and I'm incredibly impressed with the courage that you have in listening and keeping your mind open. I know that it's not usual that somebody from my neck of the woods comes out and speaks, so I appreciate the fact that you're here listening, and it really does. You really do deserve, I give you a round of applause, but it'll be a little awkward in this room. But you really do deserve it for coming out and listening. I have a couple of goals that I'd like to accomplish before I finish speaking, and I don't like speaking that long. I think that Q&A is going to be much more productive for us. But I have a couple of goals. The first thing is I want to give you a look. I don't know how many. Just a show of hands. How many people have been to Judea and Samaria, what the world calls the West Bank? Okay, so good. So a lot of people here. Okay, great. I want to give you a sense of what it's like past the headlines, what real life is like there, what I live every day, and I want to give you that sense and that feeling of what real daily life is like, and it's not at all what they portray in the news. I want to show why Jews have every single right to live in Judea and Samaria, and why we have the rights to control that land. I want to show why Israel treats and how Israel treats Palestinian Arabs with every human right that they deserve, and how both morally and legally we are there, and we treat our Palestinian Arab neighbors with every legal and moral right that they deserve. And I want to lastly, which I think is what a lot of you are probably here for, is discuss the causes for the conflict and why we're still in conflict without getting too much into history, and ways that we can get out of the conflict, how somebody like myself sees that. It's not an easy topic. It's filled with complexity. And to try to break it down in 15, 20, 30 minutes and say, here's the whole thing bundled up in a nice package would be robbing you, robbing me, robbing everybody that's involved of true understanding. And really, I have to tell you, the only way that you're really going to get a sense and an understanding is by going, talking to Jews that live there, talking to Palestinian Arabs that live there, talking to soldiers that live there, talking to politicians that live there, talking to everybody. And it's only once you talk to everybody and live there yourself and really get a sense of it, then you can really begin to understand it. I lived in America for 10 years before I moved to the Judea and Samaria, to a little town called Mitzvah Yericho, which is right outside of Jericho, on the way to the Dead Sea. So if you've ever driven from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea, so you pass my town about 20 minutes after you leave Jerusalem. And when I got there, I had all these ideas of, I've been teaching Israel advocacy and teaching the conflict for a decade, both in Los Angeles and in Florida. And I figured I had it all figured out. I knew it all. I've been reading the headlines. I've been teaching the headlines. I've been studying, and I really felt I knew it. But until I got there, I didn't really fully understand what was happening. And once I began to live there and began to see the issues up front, began to meet with my Palestinian Arab neighbors, and really begin to understand them, not as the other, but as my neighbor, then I was really able to understand what was happening inside the conflict. So I'm not going to give you everything. And if this is an ad for Hillel, so go on one of the Hillel trips to Israel, get a sense of everything. I'm not here to tell you just view the Jewish side. I think that would be robbing yourself. Hear from the Palestinians. Hear from them. Listen to what they have to say. And then after you hear from both sides, and I'm not one of this doesn't count for hearing from the Jewish side, but once you hear from both sides, then you'll be able to make an intelligent decision, intelligent conclusions about what's really happening. But that's really what it takes. I do want to save a lot of time for Q&A. My flight's not till 1 p.m. tomorrow. So for me, I got plenty of time. I'm on jet lag, so I have no idea what time it really is. I don't know if it's like 4 a.m. or 7 p.m. or any time. So really, let's take as much time as we need. And don't be shy to ask the really hard questions. Okay, I'll tell you, I have groups that come to my house, and the first group, I have like college students, high school students, in groups. I have a very large porch, and I have a lot of groups that come to that porch, and we sit out there. It can hold about 150 people, and we sit out and we discuss the issues. I've got a map, and we discuss the history, a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. And the first group I had was an incredibly left-wing group who I was shocked that they decided to come to a Jewish settlement. Most groups that are this extreme won't come to visit us. And they came in and they sat down, and the first question I got was, where are the Palestinian bodies of the people that used to live in this house? That was the last time my wife ever came to one of those sessions, and I was absolutely shocked. I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, you live on stolen Palestinian land. This is a nice house. I live in a very nice house, and this obviously must have been a Palestinian's house. And they clearly didn't walk out on their own. You must have killed them in order to take the house. So where'd you put the bodies?" And I was just like, "Wow, we've really got a lot to talk about." So you're not going to come up with a question that's that offensive. So whatever you've got, I'm ready to hear it. Okay, but so that way you should feel comfortable asking. Let's start with what real life is like. Okay, and if you look just at the headlines, you would think that living in I'm going to call it Judea and Samaria because that's what I call where I live. If you're more comfortable with the term West Banks, that's great. Yehuda v'Shamron in Hebrew. But it's not as tense as it's portrayed to be in the news. If you look at the news, you would imagine that the entire place is a military zone where everybody's tense and everybody is conflicted and everybody's at each other's throats. It's not like that. My mechanic is a Palestinian Arab who I'm very good friends with, and I have Palestinian Arabs that work in my home, and we have construction going on behind us that are all Palestinian Arabs that work in my town. I drive alongside the road with Palestinian Arabs, and we don't get into fights on the road. And if I'm at a red light, I'll ask him to roll down his window, and I'll speak to them and talk to them, and we'll go shopping together, and it's not tense at all. On the other hand, there's a lot of people that wish that the other side wasn't there, and that can get tense. But there's no danger. A lot of times groups say, "Well, could you come to Jerusalem to speak to us?" We don't, bless you. We don't want to come to you because it's dangerous, and there's no danger. Right? The best is groups that say that they don't want to come to us because it's too dangerous, but they'll go to the Dead Sea. So when you drive to the Dead Sea, you pass my house. Like I could see your tour bus as you go by. And it's much safer in my house than it is on the road because the drivers are nuts. So in that sense, it's not dangerous at all. In my view, and people can disagree with this, but I think facts are on my side on this one, Palestinian Arabs enjoy all human rights. We're going to get into that a little more. Not saying that life is pleasant for Palestinian Arabs. I'm not saying that at all. I think that I have a very healthy amount of empathy for my Palestinian neighbors. I think that I understand what they go through. I've sat and listened to their experiences. I've sat and gone through checkpoints with them, and sat and listened to how they perceive what they're going through. And it's not a pleasant experience for them. If you are under the control of somebody who you've been told your entire life is the enemy, and you have to deal with that every day, there's a loss of dignity. And that's very, very important in Arab culture. Dignity is huge. We don't put it at a premium at all in Western culture. And it's very hard when we project our values onto others and then assume that others are feeling the same way we are. That's a big mistake. And we have to understand that that loss of dignity is very, very hard for Palestinian Arabs. It's almost to the point of a pained existence. And that's something that I empathize with them and wish there was some way that I could solve that. Wish there was some way that I could take away that pain, that loss of dignity. I'm working on it. I don't have the solution, and I don't have an answer for it, but I am working on it. But I do want you to understand that it's not in any way, shape, or form that we are happy with the situation as it is now. Real life, no one's happy. No one's happy with the fact that there's a lack of trust. What's really a big misnomer about Yehuda v'Shamron is that everybody imagines that there's like Jews moving everywhere and pushing Palestinian Arabs off the land. We're demolishing all of their homes, we're demolishing their villages, and there's just Jewish growth everywhere. Here's a stat that I'm sure you're all going to look up afterwards, but anyone that's in the region can say, I don't even need to look that up, that's just obvious. 97% of Judea and Samaria is empty and unsettled. The Jews and the Palestinian Arabs, all together, combine all of our villages together, live on only 3% of the land. So when you hear that, one side or the other side is building in order to throw the other one off the land, it's absolutely absurd. There is plenty of room for us, for you, for the entire world to come move into Judea and Samaria, and no one has to move. So anytime you hear that, understand that there is 97% of the land untouched. One of the most beautiful parts of where I live is that when you drive onto my street, the first thing you see are rolling desert hills, empty, completely empty. And one day, those will be built up. I don't care who builds them up. I have no problem if my Palestinian Arab neighbors build them up, or if Jews build them up, or if, somebody else comes in and builds them up, but it's unused land. So real life in Judea and Samaria is not this turf battle over land where every inch is being fought after. It's all empty. The entire area is just about completely empty, and there's room for everybody. There aren't checkpoints everywhere. In fact, most of the checkpoints are gone. They're gone because it's a secure situation. So the checkpoints are there for security's sake. And one of the favorite spots I like taking people to, I take American students that are studying in Israel, I take them around Judea and Samaria to see what the real situation is there, for an organization called If Not Us. And I take them around. And one of the favorite places that I like showing people is, and you're welcome to come see it, are all the old checkpoints around Jericho. Because there are no functioning checkpoints around Jericho, around Jericho, because there's no security risk. And once the security risk was gone, and people realized, the Israeli security establishment realized that there was no reason to have checkpoints, they abandoned them. And people from Jericho come and go without ever having to see a checkpoint. So it's not a land with an overreaching military presence. You'll see many more soldiers in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem than you would ever see in Judea and Samaria. My settlement isn't even protected by soldiers. And once in a while we have a drive-through by soldiers, and obviously the army is up to date with what's going on, but you can come through my settlement and you won't see soldiers, except if somebody lives there. That's it. So that's real life, a real picture of what goes on in Judea and Samaria. My mouth's a little dry. Do you guys mind if I have a suck of candy? Is that okay? Okay. Thanks. From Israel. Okay, so that was the first thing I wanted to get through. Real life in Judea and Samaria. What real life looks like. And I hope that gives you a sense. Again, you want to see what real life is like? You got to come visit, and you're invited. Historically, if we go on to our next thing about Jewish rights in Judea and Samaria, historically, we have every right, we being the Jewish people, have every right to be in Judea and Samaria. It's our, thank you so much, it's our historic homeland. It's called Judea, right? We didn't make up that name 50, 60, 70 years ago. That name's thousands of years old. We've lived there. If you read your Bible and you look at archaeological records, they coincide. A few miles away from my home was where Joshua crossed the Jordan River and brought the entire Jewish people with him. We have been there for thousands upon thousands of years. And at no point did the Jewish people ever say, you know what? We were there for enough time. We're done. We're going to make somewhere else our home. 3 times a day, we've prayed to go back. And when we prayed to go back, we weren't praying to go back to Haifa and Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv wasn't even around. We were praying to go back to places like Hebron and Shechem, today Nablus, right? What people will call it. That's where we were praying to go back to. There's no difference when it comes to the land of Israel between Hebron, between my town, and between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Haifa. That's all the land of Israel. And historically, that's our land. So to say that Jews shouldn't be there is a very difficult argument to make. Because historically, we were there. And we are not settling the land, if you want to use that term. we're resettling our land. Israel in 1948 made a huge compromise. And it wasn't one that was an easy vote among the leaders of the Jewish people at the time. If somebody could, I don't know why, but my app just crashed. If somebody could hit the Facebook things right in the middle. I have students that are watching, and right now they're all freaking out, so. But if you just go, scroll to the top, or wait, just give it a second, but I'll keep going. There you go. So in 1948, we made a huge compromise. Historically, the land of Israel was always from the Jordan, not to borrow someone else's phrase, but even past the Jordan River to the sea, right? That was always the Jewish land, and we had to make a decision when the United Nations came up with the partition plan. We had to come up with a decision to either accept some of our land or stand firm and say it's all or nothing. I think that the Jewish leaders at the time made the right decision, and they accepted half the land. But that was a compromise. Everybody's got to understand the sacrifice that the Jewish people made at that time, where we said, okay, we're going to take what we can get at this point because it's been 2,000 years. 2,000 years since we've had our land and had control of our land, and the chance to get it back, the chance to secure safety and security for our people is not something that we want to give up right away. So that was a compromise. And in our compromise, we were not met with open arms by our neighbors, right? We were met very much with closed fists and war. And that's how we were met with that compromise. Our sacrifice wasn't really matched. It wasn't met by our Arab neighbors. And in 1948, when we accepted the partition plan and then had to fight for what the international community had recognized was rightfully ours, and take that half of what we were given, half of our land, the Jordanian army came into Judea and Samaria, and came into what they called the West Bank, and occupied it. The United Nations had said that that land was going to be for the Arabs that lived there. And King Hussein came in and occupied that land. And you know what? There was no BDS movement against Jordan. We're against the occupation against Jordan. There was no protests. Even the Palestinian Arabs that lived there, who at that point weren't called Palestinians, they themselves didn't protest. No one had ever thought of this idea of having a Palestinian national homeland. Jordan was in control. And Jordan was in control of that land until 1967, when Jordan made a horrendous decision to attack and to come into a war that at that point was really only Israel versus Syria and Egypt. And Jordan was warned not to come in. Jordan was told, don't come in. And Jordan attacked once. And Israel allowed it. And Israel warned, don't do it again. And they did it again. They attacked again. And fired from Judea and Samaria into mainland Israel. And it was at that point that Israel said, okay, that's it. Now we have to defend ourselves. We have to defend our citizens. And then they came through Judea and Samaria and drove the Jordanians back. Drove them back over the Jordan River into what is today Jordan. It wasn't at any point that the Israeli cabinet sat down and made a decision and said, let's start a war and take over the West Bank. Let's take over land that's not ours. It was a defensive war, and one where we had to secure our borders. And right after the war, the Israeli Security Cabinet sat down and said, okay, now let's give it back. We will give all the four lands that we took, the Golan, the Sinai, the West Bank, Gaza, we will give it back in return for peace. That's what we want. And the Arab nations got together, and they came back with 3 no's. No to recognition of a Jewish state, no to negotiations, and no to peace. Just imagine for a second if the answer had been yes. Imagine how different of a world we would live in now if the Arab world had come back and said, Israel, we will accept you among the nations of the world. We will take back the land that we just lost in a war that we started, and we will have peace. That's it. I wouldn't be giving this talk tonight.
right? Because there would be nothing to talk about. There would be no conflict. There would be absolute and total peace. And just about everybody would be happy. Imagine that. If our offer of the lands, which in any other conflict in the world, everybody would say that Israel deserved to keep when they won it in a defensive war, if Israel had given back those lands and signed a peace treaty with the Arab world, how different everything would be. It didn't happen, unfortunately, and we're still suffering the consequences of that. Going on. Today, 51 years after the Six-Day War, Israel is dealing with the fact that it has 500,000 to 1 million Palestinian Arabs under its control in what we call Judea and Samaria. Right? No one knows the true numbers, by the way. Don't believe anyone on either side with numbers. Everybody is lying. For one very simple reason. You cannot conduct a census in Judea and Samaria. Try, for an instant, going door to door in any of these villages with anything other than the colors of the home team. Okay? I don't know who the rivals of UC Berkeley are, but I can tell you, however bad it gets, try going through as a UN inspector and going door to door trying to figure out how many people live, going through Bedouin shacks and trying to understand how many people live there. You just can't figure out the numbers. So everything is projections. So whenever you hear numbers, just understand that they're false. Okay? The numbers on our side are false, the numbers on their side are false, and no one has any clue how many people live there, no one has any clue how much building is going on, no one has any idea of any of this stuff. We have all of these Palestinian Arabs who have zero interest in becoming citizens of Israel. Zero, right? The Palestinian Arabs that live in Yerushalayim and Jerusalem reject Israeli citizenship. They're fully entitled to it, and they reject it. And you have Palestinian Arabs who are in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, but they have full medical care. They have universities. They have education for their children. They have voting for their leaders. Right? There's all these misnomers about how they don't have the right to a vote. That's not true. They vote right next to my house. From my house, I can see Jericho. Jericho's 23,000 Palestinians who have their own mayor, their own city council. They have their own police force. They have everything, and they're able to do whatever they want. They can travel through Judea and Samaria to almost every single place, okay, with some restrictions, but they can travel just about anywhere. So they enjoy all human rights. There are checkpoints. There are checkpoints that prohibit certain Palestinian Arabs from going to certain places. Anybody here from northern New Jersey? Northern New Jersey, there we go. Okay, we talked about this last night. Right, we're the only one person from northern New Jersey. Man, wow, am I out of place? Okay, so I did live in LA for 8 years. So like I am, I'm somewhat Californian, okay. So anybody here been to northern New Jersey? Not the best vacation spot. Okay, but if you've been to northern New Jersey, and if you try in the morning to go to New York City, okay, if you try to go to New York City, you have to cross something called the George Washington Bridge. And if it's a work day and you're trying to cross the George Washington Bridge, it will take you, I'm not joking, 1 hour. 1 hour to cross the George Washington Bridge, and it will cost you $17 today. Okay? Now, right, it's a lot. Okay? If you have a carpool and you go regularly, it'll be less, but then if you're going regularly, it's for work, and New York City will tax you for it. So either way, you're losing out. You're not gonna win on this one. I've never heard anyone from New Jersey complain about the oppression that New Yorkers are causing them. I've never heard of it. I've never heard of the New York abuse that they put on, what are we called, New Jerseyites? I don't know what we call ourselves. But, right, so you never hear about that because that's just the reality of the situation. I assume everybody in the room, no matter where you live, has been to an airport, right? And you've gone through TSA security. Does anyone here feel secure going through TSA security? Like to feel that if you actually had a bomb in your bag, they would catch that? Right? I don't. I feel like I haven't tried, but I feel like I could probably get through with something. So no one calls that abuse. But have you ever seen anyone excitedly go through a TSA checkpoint? Like, wow, this is amazing. I love this experience. Like, where I'm going for vacation pales in comparison to the experience of getting there, right? This is just incredible. No one does. But at the same time, you don't find Americans talking about the oppression of their government on top of it. Everybody understands that for security, you go through inconvenience. You're unhappy, but there's a difference between being unhappy and being abused. People can be unhappy and they're not abused. Palestinian Arabs are unhappy. They are unhappy people. And they have every right to be unhappy. Everybody has a right to be unhappy, but they have cause for being unhappy. But just because they're unhappy does not mean that they're being abused. It doesn't mean that their human rights are being taken away from them. Okay? Everybody understands the difference. Okay? So that's the difference between a Palestinian Arab, their daily experiences, and being able to say that Israel doesn't treat them with full human rights. They treat them with full human rights. That doesn't mean that they're going to be happy, but that also doesn't mean that Israel is abusing them. You have a border. The border right now, right? I love doing this to like full-fledged Zionists that come to my house, right? Like I'm talking about like, usually generally I can get away with this with high school kids. Sometimes college students have a little more knowledge, so they know what I'm doing. A lot of times they don't. But I love when they come to my house asking, okay, you're on a trip to Israel. How many countries are you going to visit on this trip? And they always say, well, we're only going to one country. We're going to Israel, right? So I say, okay, on this trip, how many times will you leave Israel? And they'll look at me like I'm crazy. Like, none. We're only going to be in Israel. But if you're in my house, you're not in Israel. My house is not in the state of Israel. It's in the land of Israel, historically. But Israel never annexed what they call the West Bank. 51 years ago, we took it, but we never annexed it because we're waiting to give it back. As crazy as that sounds, the official Israeli government policy is to use this land to create a state for the Palestinian Arabs that live there. That's our official policy. So we've never annexed Yehuda v'Shomron. It's not part of the state of Israel. I don't live in the state of Israel. And therefore, my neighbors are not Israeli citizens. My Palestinian neighbors are not Israeli citizens. In which case, if they want to go into Israel itself and cross the border between the West Bank into Israel, they're crossing a border. And just like a Canadian can't just cross into America wherever they want, and an American can't cross into Canada whenever they want, so too a Palestinian Arab cannot cross into Israel whenever they want. They have to apply for a permit, just like any other person who's not a citizen to get into their country does. So a Palestinian Arab has to get a permit to go into Israel. Now, how many permits should we give? Keep in mind, our number one priority here has to be security. It has to be security. We must make sure that we are safe. And unfortunately, too many times, we have let too many people in and buses get blown up. That's a fact. It's a true fact. We built a wall, and magically, the bus bombing stopped. The wall, by the way, is actually a fence. 95% of it is a chain link fence. But the people like to call it a wall because it's a better picture. You can paint on it and spray paint it and graffiti it. But it's a security necessity. I once had a conversation with a member of Hamas. I like talking to people on social media. So Hamas people like talking on social media as well. So I once had a conversation and I brought this up to the member of Hamas. I said, I don't understand. How could you say that the wall is an act of abuse when it's very clear, like there's an easy cause and effect to see. Bus bombings, wall, no bus bombings. It's just obvious. He said, no, we made a strategic decision. At that point in time, we made a strategic decision to stop blowing up buses. Coincidentally, it was at that time that you decided to build this security wall fence. And I said, wow, that's amazing timing. If only we would have known. You should have told us. We could have saved a lot of money. Everybody could have been happier. But that's obviously not true. So how many Palestinian Arabs would you allow across your border? Anybody want to play security officer here? None. Okay, none. How many would you allow?
One bus.
One bus full? Okay. Okay, 55 people. Okay. Anybody want to be a little nicer?
No number of half, but very stringent criteria.
No cap, but a very stringent criteria. Okay, that's good. It's very difficult to be able to tell who's going to be a terrorist before they commit their first act of terror. And some people, it's easy. They have like a Hamas flag and they wave it, and they've got like a grenade in their hand, and they're running up to the Gaza border, and that's someone that's easy to tell. You don't want that guy going across the border. But it's very difficult for the most part to be able to tell. So yes, there are rules and there are policies that go into effect, but it's not easy. If I told you the number, right? So far we've got none to 55 to no real cap. 100,000 daily permits are given. 100,000. Now keep in mind, the greatest number that you're going to come up with of how many Palestinian Arabs actually live in Judea and Samaria is 1 million. Not excluding Jerusalem. 1 million is what you think. Jerusalem, Palestinian Arabs can go where they want. But because they're residents of Jerusalem and they're entitled to citizenship. So they don't have to apply for a permit. So excluding them, the biggest number you're going to get is 1 million. Figure half to 2/3 of them of that 1 million are women and children who are not going to go to work in Israel. Cultural reasons, and we don't let children work. So, right, so that's a good thing. So, right, so figure how many people are actually desiring to go across, right? You're down to maybe 200,000 to 300,000. Some of them work inside of Judea and Samaria for Israelis or for Palestinian businesses. So they don't have to go across because they can work inside. So 100,000 is a huge number of actual applicants for those permits. That's an amazing number. So when you say, well, they don't have freedom of travel and they can't go to work, 100,000 permits. The estimates, by the way, I have no idea how they come up with these estimates. I don't know if it's true or not, but it tells you something. 40,000 cross illegally every day. So that tells you something else. And then you have workers that work inside the towns themselves. These people have their own medical care, they have their own hospitals, and they have universities. Right? So they have the facilities. And the only reason why we're there, right? The only reason why we're really there is because for 51 years, we've been trying to give it away. You might disagree with that policy, but that is the policy. For 51 years, we've been trying to give it away. And what we've been matched in return is, unfortunately, is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Terrorism, wars, violence, that's what we've been met with. So we've been trying for 51 years, and that's why we're in control. But the official Israeli policy is that if Mahmoud Abbas and Saeb Erekat, the leaders of the Palestinian Authority, would come to Prime Minister Netanyahu today and say, you know what? Change of pace, we're going to go for a deal. Let's sit down, we'll bring in the Europeans, we'll bring in the Russians, we'll bring in the Americans, everybody can sit down at the table, and we'll hammer out a deal. In no time we'd have a deal. So that's what's holding us back from it and putting us in that situation. And that leads us to our last thing, which is the current situation. We have no peace this is obviously my opinion. I'm not a Middle East expert in any way, shape, or form. But we have no peace because the children in Jericho, which is the town next to mine, controlled again by the Palestinian Authority, controlled by Palestinian Arabs, the first graders got their first math textbooks this year. And while our math textbooks in first grade said 1 apple plus 1 apple equals 2 apples, their textbooks say 1 dead Jew plus 1 dead Jew equals 2 dead Jews. Anybody here go to public school? Named after somebody? No? Public school? No one went to a public school named after somebody? Yes?
John B. Spreckles?
I don't know who that is, but that's a great name. Okay, does anybody go to a public school named after somebody? They know who they are. Yes?
I went to Fremont High School, named after John C. Fremont.
Who was? Remind me?
He ran for president after being a Civil War general.
Okay, Civil War general. Okay, which side? Okay, so, right, I get very, it's very political. Okay, my family goes all the way back and fought for the North, so okay, so we're good. But not on the Pilichowski side, obviously. So, but their schools are named after people that have blown themselves up on buses. In Jericho recently, they named a city square after Saddam Hussein. And that's like a long time ago, right? That's not, I mean, just think about the message. I don't like playing the victim, but my childhood friend was just murdered going shopping. And he was murdered by a Palestinian terrorist who was indicted today for murder. That terrorist will receive every month from the Palestinian Authority, who has already announced that he qualifies, a salary of 6 times the amount of a teacher that works for the Palestinian Authority. Almost 7% of the Palestinian Authority's budget goes to a martyrs fund, which supports families and terrorists who have committed terror attacks, and it's on a sliding scale. The longer you go to jail, the higher the stipend, the monthly stipend. And the longer you go to jail is the more dastardly your act. So Israel will sentence you to a longer sentence if you've killed somebody than if you just attempted a terror attack. So the Palestinian Authority is rewarding Palestinians for committing a terror attack. The Palestinian Arab that killed my friend is 17 years old. Today, a Palestinian Arab in Hebron who's my age, I have 6 children and he has 7 children, so we're talking about life stats almost the same, tried to kill a soldier in Hebron and was killed himself. Ask yourself, if you're 17, if you're 42 and you have a family, what makes you a terrorist? It's incitement. It's a culture. That's a problem. That's why I think that there's no peace. But I'm not saying that we're blameless. We don't trust. Israelis don't trust. We were full of trust, some of us, in the 90s when Oslo started. And then the bus bombing started from Hamas. And then a second intifada broke out. And then more terror happened. And we lost our trust. We lost our ability to trust. There are very few Israelis today who would say, yes, if the Palestinian Arab leadership came back, I would trust them to make a real, lasting peace. So that's one of the reasons why we're at this conflict. That and the fact that I'm going to blame the international community on this one, but the international community has told Palestinian Arabs that they're victims and drilled that into them to the point where Palestinian Arabs can't get past that, where they feel that any bit of compromise on their part would necessitate a loss of their dignity. And we were once victims. We were once from the Holocaust. And we didn't turn to the world and say, now you must give us all the money in the world. Now you must support us. Now you must we built ourselves up. And I think if the message of the world to the Palestinian Arab community was, no, now it's time for you to take the ball and run with it. You've got to build yourselves up. We'll help you. But you can't play victim for so long. Now it's time to build yourselves up as a community, especially in Gaza. So I think those 3 factors are increasing and making the conflict harder to break out of. So what's the solution, right? I'm not that old, but I remember a time when we weren't calling it a solution. We called it a peace process. It was a process. It wasn't about finding a solution. It was about finding peace. And I think that you can't have a solution if you don't have peace. And that's the first thing that we've got to do. We've got to find a way for peace. Peace is very simple. Peace means we're not killing you and you're not killing me. That's peace. After that, we can figure out a solution. The solutions that we've tried to come up with have always ended poorly. Egypt used to be looked upon as a success until a dictator went away and Egypt lost control of the Sinai. And now it's a complete vacuum of power that's been taken over by terrorist factions like ISIS. So we pulled out of the Sinai Desert. That didn't turn out well as part of a solution. We pulled out of Lebanon. Hezbollah filled in the vacuum. That didn't work out well. And the ultimate failure was we pulled out of Gaza, and that hasn't worked out well either. So every time we look for a solution and don't look for peace, we come to a problem. The 2-state solution I know this is going to upset some people, is completely unrealistic. I don't think you could find anyone in Judea and Samaria who will say, yeah, let's go with a two-state solution. Palestinian, Arab, or Jew. You're not going to find any proponents of it. I'm like the most liberal guy in my entire town because I say I'd be willing to give up my house for peace. People think I'm crazy when I say that, and that's true. Whenever there's a terror victim or a soldier dies in what's always unnecessary violence, I try or my wife tries to pay what's called a shiva call, to pay a visit to the house of mourning. And those are the worst hours you ever have. Because these are people that should not be dead. There's no sane or rational reason why these people have to die. And I'm sorry if there's anyone in the room. I've had family members killed in terror attacks. I've had friends. And it's impossible. And I love my house. My house is awesome. And I have my own driving range. I have my own putting green. I've got my own batting cage with a pitching machine. My house is truly incredible. And but as incredible as my house is, I would walk out without a second's thought if you could tell me there'd be peace for it. Easily. That being said, I don't know how we get there. You just don't know. And a two-state solution is absurd because the Palestinian Arabs don't want it. They don't trust their leaders. Find me a Palestinian Arab that's not on the payroll of the Palestinian Authority that likes the Palestinian Authority. Try it. So they don't trust their leaders to negotiate it. We're not trusting our leaders to negotiate it, and we don't trust any solution that's going to come at it. So you might go to a one-state solution. Then you have a possible demographic problem. So that might not work out. So now what do? So this is going to kill everybody in the room. You have two choices left. You have one, which is annexation by Israel and giving full rights of citizenship to the Palestinian Arabs, who generally probably won't take it. And then you're dealing with an impossible situation trying to figure out how that looks logistically. But at the same time, this is going to really throw people. There's been no one that's guaranteed human rights to all three religions in Israel like the Jewish state. Between 1948 and 1967, those 19 years that the Jordanians had control of Yehuda v'Shomron, every synagogue was burnt down. Tombstones were ripped up and used as latrines. So that wasn't human rights. Today, on the Temple Mount, it was the most absurd situation you could ever think of. The only people persecuted and not allowed freedom of prayer and religion are the Jewish people. It's forbidden for a Jew will get arrested if they go up onto the Temple Mount and pray. That's crazy. I mean, if you just think about that, right? So the only way I can imagine that we could guarantee human rights to everybody is if we take sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Would that work? Definitely wouldn't bring peace. For sure not. So I don't know if that works. And then the other possibility is just keeping the status quo. And just letting what goes on go on. It's been going on for 50 years. So let it go on for another 50 years. But it's absurd because we're just going to kill each other. That's all we're doing, is killing each other. It's absolutely crazy. It's insanity. So here's the deal I'm going to give you. If anyone can come up with a solution to this problem and bring peace, you'll get a Nobel Peace Prize, I guarantee. Okay? But short of that, right, we're just going to continue. And really, if you just put in some effort and get everybody to agree to your plan, and it doesn't even bring a true, they'll give you the prize anyway. Okay? Very generous with it, especially when it comes to the Middle East. So that's really all I have to say. I do want to say thank you, and I do want to offer you something. I don't have gifts for everybody, but I do want to offer you something. I want to offer you the chance to really see what life is like. And here's what I offer you. If a group of you comes to, let's say, gain perspective, I don't know, January time, and you want to come see what life is really like, I will, if there's a group of 15 of you, I will cover the cost of a bus and lunch and take you around. Not a propaganda tour. I will show you places for the day. On my bill. Show you around, bring you to my house, and on one condition though. You have to go see the other side as well. And then you can have an educated discussion. But don't come to Israel and go on what's called like an unbiased tour. They don't exist. There's not a person in the world that's not biased in this area. Okay? And then imagine that you've seen everything, because then you're just being taken for a ride. So everybody here is invited, on me, to come around for the day. I'll get the bus. I'll show you around, perfectly safe. And I'll take you to my house and you're invited. We'll sit around, we'll talk. I know this is, in Berkeley, this is probably horrible. I asked the concierge downstairs in my hotel if this was allowed, and I thought I was like asking if I could burn cats. I asked if I could smoke a cigar somewhere. And so that was not the question to ask. But if you like cigars, I've got a great cigar collection. You can smoke a cigar, it's perfectly allowed where I live. And you're all invited. And if you don't like cigars, I won't force you. But you're all invited. And that's really my offer. So again, I want to thank you from Hillel. I know, don't worry, I'm getting it. I want to thank Natan and his friends from Tikva for this opportunity. And now's when the real fun is going to start. So let's get going with questions. Yeah, just tell me your name and where you're from.
My name is Elia. I grew up in Jerusalem.
Cool.
First question, how long have you lived in West Bank? How long have you lived in Israel?
I've lived in Israel now. I'm on my 5th year. I'm not a veteran by any shape or form.
And before that, did you live in Israel prior to that?
I lived for 8 years in Israel. After high school, I stayed for 8 years. I got married. I had 3 children. And then I moved to Beverly Hills, California. I lived there for 8 years. And then I moved to Boca Raton, Florida. Lived there for 3 years. And then I moved back to Israel, to Mitzvah. Oh, that's right. Okay. That's pretty easy. Okay. Yes?
My name is Zephin. I've lived in the Bay Area my whole life.
Okay.
When I have discussions with people that are pro-Palestine, they usually refer to Israel as an apartheid state. Could you kind of steel man what they mean by that, and then take it apart? Like, how would you address that?
Yes, I think when they say it's apartheid, what they mean to say is that we have 2 types of people: Jews who have Israeli citizenship, and Palestinians or Palestinian Arabs who don't have Israeli citizenship, living in the same area. And people mistakenly think that that's apartheid. Apartheid actually is when you have 2 people who are citizens of the same country, living in the same country, who don't have equal rights. So that's just not the reality of what Israel is. It's a mistake. Do Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews share the exact same rights? No. Just like you don't share the same rights with people from Mexico, right? You have greater privilege than they do, right? And that's the reality of the world. We would love to live in a world where everybody gets to enjoy everything that everybody else gets to have. It's just not the reality, right? That's never going to be the reality. Don't tell Bernie Sanders, but that's never, right? That's not going to be the reality of any society that we create, okay? That being said, right? That's not the reality. It's not apartheid, right? Because apartheid would be if we offered citizenship to the Palestinian Arabs in Judea and Samaria, and then said, you can be a part of us, but understand you're not getting the following things that all the Jews have. That would be apartheid. I wouldn't stand for that. I would protest louder than anyone else that shouldn't happen. But keep in mind, Israel has 1.6 million Israeli Arabs, 20% of our country, 13 members of our Knesset. More than 13, really. 13 are in the Arab party, but there are Arabs in the Jewish parties, right? So they have representation in the Knesset. Have every single right that I have, no more, no less, right? So we're not an apartheid country. We don't have rights based on the fact whether you're Jewish or Muslim or anything. That's a fallacy. It's not true.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Benny.
Hi, Benny.
And my question is, what's your incentive to live in the West Bank? Monetary, ideological?
No, I'm not ideologically. I'll tell you the honest truth. Like people get very disappointed, so I'm sorry when I say this answer. But when I went on a website from an organization called Nefesh B'Nefesh, and they have like this part of the website where it's like drop-down menus. This is like really not like a great thing. so don't get excited for some like moment that this is leading to. And it asks you different questions. What type of town do you want to live in? How much money you want to spend? Religious, not religious, area of the country. I had a job when I first moved to Israel that was near Jerusalem. I like having a big house with a yard and stuff, right? That's I like living like that. And I don't have that much money. I'm a teacher, right? So put all those together, and it spit out this place called Mitzvah, which I had never heard about before. So we went on our pilot trip to Israel. All the Americans generally live in like a couple of different areas, so that's where we figured we'd end up. And then we went to Mitzvah. We met with the principal of the school, who's now a close friend. He's great. He's a great educator, so we felt comfortable with our children there. And where we live is absolutely beautiful. 20 minutes to Jerusalem with no traffic. The government gave me no incentives to live there. My taxes aren't lower. I don't have. I can't think of any right that I have or any privilege that I have that other people that don't live in Judea and Samaria offer. 30 years ago, there were financial incentives to move out to Judea and Samaria. Those are long gone, trust me. Right? I paid. I don't mind saying it's probably public record somewhere, but I paid $500,000 for my home. Right, I mean, I didn't actually pay for it, the bank did, but that's something you'll learn quickly. But so there's no incentive ideologically. I'm not against living there, obviously, because I live there, but there was no incentive in terms of like ideology or financial to live out there. I just wanted a home, and they're not building really single-family homes anymore in Israel. They're building like these units, which I don't like. Yes.
My name is Avi. So right now it seems like the Jews who live in the West Bank all live in settlements. Do you think there will ever be like settlements that develop into cities or like cities themselves in the West Bank that are cohabited by Jews and Muslims?
Ooh, I would love that. But no. The all places in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, that Jews live in are called settlements by others. I don't mind the word settlement because in the Torah it says that you should settle the land, so I take it as a badge of honor. But other people don't like the term. I don't have a problem with it. But there are settlements that have gotten so big they're now officially cities. Ma'ale Adumim is 10 minutes away from my house. That has 40,000 people living in it. That's a city already. The Gush Etzion region is already large. It's 50, 60,000 people that live there. Right? So these places are, the largest settlement is an ultra-Orthodox settlement called Modi'in Illit. Or Kiryat Sefer, it has two different names. And that's today is 65,000. Tomorrow literally will be 67,000 and keep going up. It goes up every single day. So that's the largest, and that's a city. These are cities already. Yeah, so, but will there ever be they just built a new Palestinian city, which definitely on a trip you should definitely go see. So, and it's a beautiful city, Rawabi, but there's no Jews that live there. But that would be a great experiment. If you put Jews and Arabs living together in Judea and Samaria. I'd love to see that. Yes?
Hi, I'm Ella.
Hi, Ella.
I was really shocked to hear that 97% of the West Bank is uninhabited, and I was kind of wondering if you could speak more to that, and I was wondering if there's any kind of like rush on either side to build there.
Well, there's a rush by everybody to build. The people that are most rushed in building are the Europeans, the European Union. They've spent, this is incredible, they've spent $820 million in my neighborhood over the last couple of years to try to make sure that Jews don't build. They're taking Bedouins who are nomadic by nature and forcing them to stay put by offering them financial incentives not to move. So it's like a real ridiculous situation. So that's what's happening. I live next to E1, which is probably the most disputed piece of real estate in the world. And so yes, everybody's trying to build. No one gets permits. Permits are impossible. You know, they always say like Palestinians can't get permits. Jews can't get permits either. No one's getting permits. Our current Prime Minister Netanyahu, likes the status quo. I mean, we've never had a conversation about it, but from his actions, that's what I take, is that he likes the status quo, so he's not too generous on permits. So if there were permits, I personally, I believe everybody should get permits. Give permits to everybody, as long as you keep to like certain codes of zoning and building. Let everybody build. We got plenty of room for everybody. Why can't we let everybody build? But that's not happening. Then no one's building because no one's allowed to build. There's an increase in the last couple of years of building, but very small. So that's what I have to say about it. Yes?
Hi, I'm Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Skokie.
Okay.
So you laid out a probably rather bleak, though very realistic outlook on the situation, and
No one said I had to make everybody happy.
I know. So I'm just curious, and I think you hinted at it, but to the level that you're comfortable, can you lay out what you think would be the most idealistic situation for 50 years from now, what the situation is?
Without reality interfering in what I would want to happen, or with reality?
A little bit of both, maybe.
There's no such thing, right? So I think the reality I laid out, I think that the status quo is going to remain for the next 50 years, unless an Israeli prime minister decides to act unilaterally. That's what happened with Ariel Sharon. Ariel Sharon decided we're not going to make a deal with the Palestinian Authority, so I'm just going to do what I want and pull out of Gaza, right? So he acted unilaterally. So barring a prime minister in Israel who acts unilaterally to come up with his own solution without the support of the people behind him and without working with the Palestinians or the international community, barring that, the status quo stays the same for the next 50 years. I'm an Orthodox rabbi, so of course Mashiach comes. So those are, that's I'll tell you a great story. For those that are not familiar, Mashiach is the Messiah, and we believe that any day he could come, and we're eagerly awaiting his arrival. I was part of a kolo, which is, for lack of a better term, a graduate studies program in Israel in my beginning years of post-marriage. And the kolo that I got into gives you 4 years of ability to study with a stipend and a free apartment for 4 years. And while I was in the kolo, I got an offer from a different kolo to join on the same exact campus, like an American kolo. And I went to the head of the kolo from the Israeli kolo and asked him, if I leave, can I come back? Do I still get my years? So he said, well, I can promise you the stipend, but I can't promise you an apartment. And I just to let you know, they may be paid once every 3-4 months. Okay, this wasn't like a guaranteed paycheck. So that wasn't really an offer. So I said, well, what about the apartment? That's the key. I need a place to live. So he said, well, listen, I don't know if Mashiach comes, if the Messiah comes, I don't know if I get to keep these apartments. So I said, okay, let's say he doesn't come. He goes, then you can have, yeah, for sure, no problem. I was like, okay, deal. So I do think that at any point Mashiach will come. So if Mashiach comes, then I think that's the ideal. In that sense, I think what will happen is that we'll all live in peace together. That's not where I see it at this point where where like we say to the Palestinian Arabs, okay, our Mashiach is here, see you later. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that we'll all live in peace, which I also think is the ideal. I think the ideal is where we live in peace with our Palestinian and Arab neighbors. We all get along. I mean, I just give you like one way life would get so much better, which is one of the frustrations. I'm a huge Amazon Prime fan. Love the idea that at any point that you want something, you can just go online, click, and get it in 2 days, right? It's like, and I can't get that in Israel. You can't do that in Israel. You can get Amazon, it takes like a week and a half, right? Which is against the whole purpose of Prime, right? So, because by the time you get it, like that whole like instant gratification desire is over. So the reason why we can't have that in Israel is because our market is so small. And that's why prices are so high, right? In America, you have 300 million purchasers, right? So that makes, you can make a lot of stuff and you can sell it for cheaper. So we don't have that in Israel. But imagine if I could go out to eat in Damascus, right? Or go out, Amman is a 40-minute drive from my house, right? So imagine I could see Amman from my house. That's my night view. So imagine if I could just drive to Amman to a store and buy something. Imagine if all of us shared our Amazon Prime together. That would be an amazing, amazing difference in all of our lives. And no one would be killing each other. So like that bonus. So that's what I see as an ideal.
So if we're in agreement that the status quo is far from ideal, and we need to eventually get past it, how do you think settlements play into, or building new settlements plays into getting past the status quo and building trust?
Well, so here's an interesting fact. In the last 25 years, there hasn't been one new settlement. So there are no new settlements. But if we had our way and we could build new settlements, so I think that would be a very good thing because I feel everybody should build. I think that as time goes on, there are consequences to choosing violence and terrorism over peace. I don't think you get to choose violence and terrorism every single year and then one day decide, okay, now we want peace and we get to have everything that we could have had 50 years ago. I think there's consequences, and one of those consequences is that there's going to be more Jewish houses. And that you're going to have to deal with that in negotiations. I think that's a fact. In the same way that we have to deal with the fact that there are a lot of descendants of Palestinian Arabs who are out there, and they keep growing because there's no place where anybody will accept them, right? So as time goes on, there are more and more consequences that have to be dealt with. So that's just a reality of the situation. But a misnomer is the fact that there are more and more settlements being built. 25 years since the last settlement was built. Oh yeah, let me give somebody who has a gun. Yeah.
So, this is a question relating to the ethical principles, and I hope you answer in a way that is informed by your Jewish values. So, the fact of the matter is that as the status quo continues, there are many innocent victims of terror that are killed. And I wondered what you think the Israeli government could do if it was willing to compromise everything else to try and prevent these deaths from happening.
What? I don't understand the question. What else? What should we compromise on?
Well, for example, the IDF has very stringent ethical principles that it must abide by. Israel also accommodates to a significant degree to international law.
So you want us to get rid of those values?
Well, my question is, do you think that they could be, and do you think that that could relate to fewer deaths of innocent?
Wow. I hope not. I do think that there are certain policies that trouble me, that really, really trouble me. There are certain policies that do bend to international will and international law that I think are wrong, that I think we suffer through. I think it's a crazy situation where we warn the enemy before we bomb them. Right? Only Israel does that. Germany, of all places, Germany brought us to at the famous security conference that they have every year. A German general accused Israel of being too moral. I mean, this is like absurd. Like, if you think about it, being too moral in warfare and holding the international community to too high a standard, which can't be upheld by every army. So, because what we do is when we bomb a place in Gaza, we drop a dud on the roof, and it shakes the roof and alerts everybody in the building that you're about to be bombed, so you should leave. That's after we send a text message to everybody. I don't know how Israel does this. Some companies should figure out how they're doing this, and be able to advertise this way. But they send a text message to everybody in the area saying, "Hey, we're about to bomb building number 13. That's not a good place to be. Get out." Then they drop the dud. And if there are civilians then in the area, Israel doesn't bomb it. Right? It's like insane. Right? So I guess you could say maybe we should just bomb the place and forget about it, right? We should take I disagree with this. I want to make sure that everybody understands that I disagree with this practically. But you could say that there are now 10,000 Palestinian Arabs on the Gaza fence who are throwing fire kites over and grenades over and bombs over the fence and waving machetes and screaming, "We're going to kill you," and building terror tunnels. So a quick solution would just carpet bomb the entire place. And then we wouldn't have to worry. Well, it'll take us 1 hour. We wouldn't have to worry. I think it's horrible. Horrible. So I'm not a security expert, so I don't know where we could compromise and save lives. But again, I'm not a security expert. I don't know what will de-incentivize. I'd rather put our money into somewhere else and our thoughts into somewhere else. I'd rather figure out a way to live civilly with each other and figure out that way than try to figure out which international and moral, fences that we put up for ourselves we can take away and get better served that way. Yeah.
So in your opinion, with regard to Judea and Samaria, what should Israel do to optimize for peace in some future?
What should we do? I don't know if there's anything else we could do than what we're doing now.
What is that?
What are we doing now? We're sitting waiting at a table and saying, "Please, we'll go to you, you come to us. Wherever you want, we will go. And we will sign a peace deal and give you the land that you want." Right? That's what we're doing. We've done it. Olmert's offered 97%. Ehud Barak's offered 97%. We can't really offer more than what's been offered already. Right? That's it. So we have certain security requirements that need to be met, which no one in the world thinks is absurd. Right? So I don't know what else we could really do. We don't have anyone to talk to. No one will talk to us. So if no one's going to talk to us, what more can we do? I just don't know. We're not going to walk out. Right? We did that in Gaza. That didn't end well. So I really don't know what else we could do. And that didn't bring peace.
Do you think there should be more people, the same amount of people, less people, or it doesn't matter?
Where?
Judea and Samaria.
I want more people. I want as many people as we can get in there. Yeah, I think that's important.
What's your opinion on President Trump and his policies towards
Israel? Let's take President Trump just on Israel, right? Because everything else isn't relevant to us. I think President Trump is unique in his approach to Israel. I don't think any president has taken the approach that he has. I have to be honest, I teach Israel political advocacy. So I make it a mission to know people in very, I guess you'd call it high places. And I've had friends in the Bush administration, Obama administration, and now the Trump administration. So I very much subscribe to a bipartisan support of Israel. So I have very close friends from all three administrations. And I'll be at the White House next week. So I've gotten to know a lot of the Trump administration's approach to things, and I find it absolutely fascinating. Fascinating because it's so out of the box. So like, I wrote you can look this up, I wrote a blog piece from right before President Trump took over and said, here's how we're going to grade him. Here are like 6 factors that we're going to grade him on, and if he does these 6 things, we'll like him. If he doesn't do these 6 things, we're not going to like him. Those are, and like, none of them matter, like with the way he's taken an approach to things. But what I find fascinating from listening to him, the one great thing about President Trump is that and this is going to sound insane, but he actually speaks the truth when he goes off script. It's awesome when you can hear that switch. When you see him like reading, and then he just says what's on his mind. It's like the greatest moment. And if you get to know him well enough, you'll be able to pick that. That's where you start paying attention. Where he starts really talking from what he's thinking. And he's thinking as he's talking. He's definitely thinking as he's talking. And there was a moment he spoke to Jewish leaders before Rosh Hashanah. And if you remember, when he was campaigning and during the beginning of his presidency, and still now, he still says it, he says, this is the deal. The deal. This is the deal to be made. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the deal to be made. And we will make it. I got Jared on it. We're going to do this, right? And I went to the same high school as Jared. So, like, fresh. And he says it. And on the Rosh Hashanah call, you can see he's reading off a script that he's reading into the telephone. And then he stops and he says, I'm starting to think maybe you can't get it done. And he said that off the cuff. And then went right back to the script. And I was like, whoa! Well, by the way, you can, if you look me up on my YouTube channel, I put the speech on and you can listen to it. And listen for that moment. And you can see, like, this is not a man that generally ever expresses humility out loud. I'm sure privately he does it all the time. But out loud, he likes to spew the air of confidence that he can get anything done. And to hear somebody like that say, maybe we can't get it done, showed an evolution of thought that was surprising to me. So I think that what you're seeing is a president who really wants to support Israel, but also wants to get a deal done and make life better for both sides. Why he wants to do it, I'm not a psychologist. But I think that's definitely true that he wants to get that done. And I think he's starting to realize that this is not so easy. And I think the reason why he's recognizing it's not so easy is because not everybody is looking for the best interests of their people, both sides. I think he sits there and says, wait a minute, listen, I want to get this deal done. Why don't you guys want to get the deal done? Let's all get the deal done. We're all sitting here. Let's get the deal done. And then the deal doesn't get done. He doesn't understand why. So I think that in most situations that doesn't happen. Right? In most situations, if everybody says they want to get the deal done, you get them in a room, hammer out the details, the deal gets done. Right? And that's not happening. So I think you're watching the evolution. So in terms of President Trump, that's my take. You asked me my take. Again, I'm not an expert, but that's my take, that there's a lot of evolution of thought going on inside the White House. And I think there's a lot of people that are tremendously pro-Israel. There are a lot of people that have great disappointment that I've spoken to in how the Palestinian Authority have reacted. I think there's a lot of shock from a lot of people in the White House recognizing the fact that the Palestinian Arab people, what's amazing about the people that are working on the deal, right, that are working on the conflict, which I can tell you from intimate conversations with them, is that they go out and purposely meet with the average Palestinian Arab on the street, not the ones, put in front of them by the Palestinian Authority with their scripts. They go out, they invite them to their hotels, they have conversations with them, and they really get to know them. And I think that one thing that's shocking to them is that the average person on the street doesn't look to the Palestinian Authority as their leaders. In fact, is like to the point of hating them. I think that also has thrown them of, if we sign a deal with these people, and then they're the leadership, but then they're not really representing their people, who are we signing a deal with? Right? And then throw Hamas into the mix. So I think that's what you're seeing. But that's my projection. Yeah, just that's what I'm assuming. Yeah.
In a phone call yesterday, Trump is reported to have said to Macron that he believes he can bring Netanyahu to the bargaining table and that he owes him for Jerusalem.
Yeah, you hear this all the time.
Yeah.
Right, he owes me. Right.
And do you believe that that would result in an unfavorable deal?
No, because for a number of reasons. One, I don't trust any news reports on phone calls between President Trump and somebody else. Like, how does the news reporter know that? Like, just ask yourself that question. Did President Trump tell them? Did the people in the room tell them? And if the people in the room told them, why did they tell them? Right? Who are they trying to make look good by telling the reporter? And then if they're trying to make somebody look good, then they're obviously twisting the phone call to make it sound one way or the other. So I don't trust this stuff. That being said, President Trump himself has said publicly, that we've heard him say that I gave a lot to Israel with the embassy, and now Israel's going to have to give something. The problem is that the Palestinian Authority doesn't want to take anything. Right? They have the sweetest moment now. I think it's even better for them than President Obama, because they could turn to President Trump and say, you really messed us over. This really made us look bad, the embassy. And now we want something big. Get us something big. And I think that you could watch that happen, but they're not. They're missing an opportunity. Yeah.
I want to go back about like a few of the points and the information that you were given. You were saying that information that comes from the West Bank is hard to like follow and it's not always up to date.
The census, yeah.
A few things. First of all, you said there was no new settlements past 25 years. My sister lives in Faladad, which was built in the early 2000s. A settlement right by Macadam, infamous. And so as someone who most of his life spent in Israel, lives in Israel, a lot of my high school friends from the Harman Institute lived in the West Bank. So I still have a lot of friends living in the West Bank, and I served the military in the West Bank. There are a lot of new settlements. So
I'm not so sure about that.
But I would say the conversation of what data is right is a different conversation. What I do want to ask is, because it's hard to say, and when it comes to the economic perspective, and you were saying that there's no incentives financially today, there aren't maybe direct incentives like they used to be 34 years ago, but there are direct incentives when it comes to the cost of living, the amount of money that is funded by the government towards education of Jewish students compared to Israeli students otherwise elsewhere in the state. Public transportation in the West Bank doesn't justify its cost. And these are incentives. As someone who's seen and has this conversation with a family member that chose to live there for financial reasons, these financial incentives are pushing people to move in the West Bank. It is cheaper, like you said, you have a house that otherwise is like beyond reasonable anywhere else in Israel, but financially, and like you don't have the views, which are incredible. I must agree. But don't people see that this might be a problem for a future two-state solution?
So I'll take two parts of your question separately. The first is that it's true what you're saying in terms of that it's financially beneficial or more beneficial to live in Judea and Samaria than it is, let's say, in Yerushalayim or Tel Aviv. But it's financially more beneficial to live in the Negev or the Golan than it is to live in Judea and Samaria. It's cheaper there. At the same time, you might not be able to get to work in a place on the central coast that way or in Jerusalem. But with the new trains, that's not going to be true, right? So I think that we'll split the difference. That yes, it's true that it's definitely cheaper to live in Judea and Samaria than some of the bigger cities in Israel, for sure. But if you're looking at pure, where is it cheapest to live, that's not in Judea and Samaria. The second part that you said was, now I'm forgetting. What was the second part that you mentioned? What?
The first part.
What was the first part?
About the settlement.
Right, but there was something else that you had. It's a two-state solution. So do I think that it's going to affect more Jewish building, affect the two-state solution? Yes, 100%. The more building there is, the less likely there is of a two-state solution. But keep in mind, I don't think a two-state solution will ever happen anyway. Number one, and number two, I think that, like I said before, there are consequences to 50 years of saying no to a two-state solution. right? Or 70 years if you take the partition plan and go all the way back to there, or 85 years if you take the Peel Commission, right? So there are problems, right? There are problems and there are consequences and ramifications of that. So yeah, so that I do agree. The more building there is, the less likelihood of a two-state solution. But again, I don't think it's going to happen anyway. I think we're way past that point.
Can I follow up? So you were saying earlier, and you were somewhat portraying this image that the Black Palestinians, they're not happy, but they have access to human rights, which wasn't like totally defined. But from knowing your area, and one of my high school teachers, Baruch Olenbach.
Yeah, he's my neighbor.
So
Yeah.
he was one of my high school teachers.
He's gonna love this moment. Yeah. I wish my phone was still on here. I'd love to show him this. Yeah, go ahead.
So, like, I know the area that you live in, right?
Yeah.
I know the connections between Palestinians that live in the area and Jewish people that live in the area. At the same time, from my experience, personally, other parts of the West Bank, people are not living so happily. Other parts of the West Bank, if I'm not even talking if you're going to refugee camps in Shechem, but if you're going to Hebron, what's going on down there with the Jewish settlement down there, and the way that it cuts the city, and the access of people within the city, when it comes to the rates of poverty, the rates of high access to education and access to health are not anywhere close to what happens in other parts of the West Bank, like Ramallah, where you live, or Rabi in northern Kakila, and those areas. But there is a problem. I was trained to speak Arabic in the military. I had conversations with people. I've been there, and I truly believe that people are suffering and don't have access to those human rights. And I really hope that this is something that would be brought through, and it is brought through with other organizations like Breaking the Silence and stuff like that, which...
So I think, I hear your point that I don't think that they're losing human rights, but I do think that they're not giving, they're not enjoying life in the way that they should be, right? I think that they have the rights to better life. But I think that all too often we make a simple equation, which I think is superficial, that, well, Israel's in control, so Israel's to blame, right? So especially cities like Shechem and cities like Hebron, that those areas are Area A, that those areas are under the Palestinian Authority. And the international community has put in billions of dollars in foreign aid, billions of dollars in foreign aid, that could very easily improve schools and roads and all these problems that you mentioned. And Mahmoud Abbas was a college professor, right? Any of your college professors worth $250 million? Right? How did he get that money? All of his sons are worth $200 million. None of them are in business, right? Yasser Arafat died worth $3 billion. His personal money. So I think it's not accurate to say, well, it's Israel's responsibility to make life better for them. The international community and Israel gives money, right? Has the ability to help, and the international community has done its part, and the Palestinian leadership has embezzled those funds and been completely corrupt, which the Palestinians complained, right? So to say that it's Israel's fault and to lay blame in Israel, I think is a cheap shot. You know, I think that, yes, I'm not saying that I said that human rights, I don't think that and I'm the first one to say that life could be better for them and should be better for them. And I'd like to see it better for them. But I don't think that you can lay the blame at Israel's feet and say it's all because of Israel's policies. I think that if we had sunk that money, look at Rabi, right? A businessman decided to put $1 billion in, and it was a beautiful city with everything you just said is they're going to have. So where are the billions in foreign aid that could have done that for Shechem and for Hebron and for all these different cities that they could have had? That's what I think. But thank you for protecting us. Yes.
I guess also follow up to that. I've thought about this a lot. Like, how much? This is just like, I don't know if you can speak more to this, but how much of that, like, the fact that there's like a Jewish settlement, he said it's like kind of like cutting through or like in the way of these like settled or Palestinian like movements. How much of that and the fact that there's like Israeli military there to protect that Jewish settlement, so obviously they're like, you know, kind of occupying that area in whatever way that they are, and then that's preventing the like building of roads, infrastructure, and like that money going towards that, or is it actually just like straight up corruption? Like,
I think if you go and you look, you'd see it's straight up corruption. That being said, if the entire Israeli army and all the Jews pulled out of Hebron, would it be easier to build? Yes, but I don't see any reason why that should happen. The same way I don't think the Arabs should leave Hebron, right? I don't think that every Arab should leave Hebron. I don't think that's fair to say. I don't think there's a reason to say that all the Jews should leave, especially since the Jews have 4 or 5 streets total in Hebron. It's not that much. I don't know the exact number, but it's a very small area. There are 100,000 Palestinian Arabs in Hebron, and there are 400 Jews. So to look at it and be like, you know what the problem with Hebron is? It's the 400 Jews. They're an impediment to all peace. Take the army out of there, everything will work well, right? It's crazy, right? So yeah, if I'm a Palestinian Arab and I see those Israeli soldiers and I see those Jews walking on their protected streets, that upsets me, right? The same way if I'm a Jew in Hebron and I look at the area where 100,000 Palestinian Arabs are and I can't walk there, that upsets me. And therefore we have a conflict, right? So the solution to that conflict, I don't think, is throwing anybody out. I think the solution is improving everybody's lives there. That's the solution. So when people say oh, if we just got rid of the Jews, so then everything would be better, right? So that's we've heard that before. It doesn't work. That's what I'd say.
Sorry, I have one more question. This is back to something we were talking about before, but I know very little to this, so I'm asking could you tell me more? But I heard that there's some kind of law passed about something in Israel in the Knesset that something about second-class citizens for air. I don't know. This is very
the nation-state law.
Yes.
Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I'm not going to talk about the nation-state law for a very simple reason. Read it. Okay. It's in English.
Okay.
Type in Google Jewish nation-state law English. The thing is 2 pages long. And then ask yourself, is there number 1, any change to anyone's lives because of it? And number 2, is there anything racist in there? The document is completely tone deaf. What I mean by that, what was the point of it? I'll tell you the point of it in a minute. But the document was completely tone deaf and with 2 added paragraphs. One that talked about democracy and the value of democracy, and one that would have talked about the Arabs in the region. Those 2 paragraphs just would have mentioned them. There would be no controversy whatsoever. There were people that felt that those paragraphs shouldn't be in, and they were put in, taken out. That would have solved all the problems. The reason why the document was passed was because Israel doesn't have a constitution. As crazy as it is, because we can't get along on anything and we can't figure anything out. So we realized we don't have a constitution, and we realized that without a constitution, we've got no paper that says what we are. So if you read the nation-state law, right, and you read this document, you will sit there and say, I don't get this. This doesn't make any sense. This is what we've always been told about Israel. What's different about this? And you realize it's nothing different. They just codified everything that we've always stood for beforehand. The problem is that everybody sits there and says, whoa, wait a minute. What's this all about now? Hold on a second. How come I'm not in that document, right? And then you start to say, whoa, it's racist. It doesn't put enough stress on democracy. Yeah, because when you imagine if we wrote the American Constitution now and the Bill of Rights now, just the Second Amendment. Imagine if today, 250 years later, we decide, let's put the second. Can you imagine the uproar if we said, no, everybody should have a gun? Well, hold on a second. Wait a minute. Right? You would never get the Second Amendment passed. You can't state your values after the fact. Right? So that's what we tried doing, and obviously it caused a huge uproar. But if you read it, it's in English, it's translated in English, you read the document and then get back to me and tell me if you see anything racist in there or if you see anything that changed anything beforehand. There's not one difference legally. Nothing whatsoever legally in the document. Yeah?
You talked about the difference in the military presence and lifestyle of Palestinians depending on where they're living in the West Bank. But now I want to ask about the area that has been annexed, being East Jerusalem. Jerusalem is now unified. It was reclaimed by Israel after 67. But I wanted to know your feelings about final status for the city of Jerusalem, whether divided or unified, and the current status and lifestyle of Arab Palestinians living in, or Israelis, depending on whether or not they accept citizenship, living in Jerusalem.
Okay, I'm going to try very hard to get all of those. And Jerusalem was never divided until 1948, right? There was no such thing. Even the United Nations didn't say that there should be a divided Jerusalem. It's never happened. In 1948, there was a war. The war ended with one side on east and one side on west. And then they said, we're not going to cross that line, right? No Jew should cross the line, and no Arab should cross the line either. Can I tell you a funny story? Sometimes I get carried away with my stories. Can I tell you a funny story? Yes, it's okay? Okay, I figure if you're here now until this point, so either you're too embarrassed to get up or you're into the funny story. So my wife works at a Catholic hospital right outside the old city of Jerusalem called the French Hospital. And there's a famous story of the French Hospital, you can look this up, that between 48 and 67, I don't know the exact year, there was the hospital's, one of the walls faced the walls of the old city. There's like a street across, the light rail goes there, and an older woman was in bed and sneezed, and her dentures flew out the window into what was then the no man's land, right outside the old city walls, where Jordanian soldiers stood on top of the walls, and if a Jew got too close, a Jordanian soldier could snipe you and kill you. That was a real concern. So the dentures went over, and the nuns who worked in the French hospital didn't know what to do. How do you get the dentures back if you go out there and get sniped? So they called the United Nations, who called the Israeli army, the Jordanian army, and all three, the Jordanian army, the United Nations, and the Israeli army, all went out on the street with two nuns to pick up the dentures and bring them back. Okay? That's the only time the city was divided, in those 19 years. The plan in the partition plan was that Jerusalem should not be divided. The partition plan said that Jerusalem should be an international city, which never happened. So for 19 years, there was this artificial division between the east side of Jerusalem and the west side of Jerusalem. It was never designed to be half Arab, half Jewish. It was never going to be a capital of the Palestinian people, ever. Right? It was never designed that. We had always said that we want Jerusalem as our capital, because for 3,000 years, that's what we've always been looking towards, Jerusalem as our capital. Find me somewhere in pre-1948 where official Palestinian documents, religious or otherwise, will say that Jerusalem is our capital. Maybe you'll find it. I don't think so. I've never heard of that. So the artificial division is an artificial division. In 67, after 19 years of Jordanian occupation, when we took the rest of the city and reunited it and unified it, so then we had a situation where we annexed it, and now we have to give full citizenship to the Arabs that live there, because once we annex it, we have to. I just went on a tour. I love taking left-wing tours. I take left-wing tours all the time. Okay, I love it. Breaking the silence, I've gone on a couple of times. I love these tours. These are great. And I don't go to argue. I go sit there like a nice boy, and I sit there, and I'm very quiet, and afterwards I write up my experiences, and they're sort of like in this catch-22, I assume, where they can't tell me don't go, right? They always call and try to convince me not to go. Do you really realize we've Googled you, we know who you are, this might not be, maybe you signed up for the wrong type of tour. No, I know what I'm doing. I like to go, and it's sometimes it gets a little bad, sometimes not so much. But I was on a left-wing tour, and we talked to a woman who lived in Silwan, and then on Israel's dime, got a full scholarship to nursing school at Hadassah in Karam, and then moved out of Silwan when she started making money, and then she comes back for these left-wing tours because she has a somewhat decent English and tells everybody how bad it is to live under the Jews. And she was saying how East Jerusalem residents have it like the worst, because there's Israeli security everywhere, and in a certain sense I felt for what she was saying. But then somebody on the tour said, well, why don't you just get Israeli citizenship? Right? It's available to you. Why don't you take it? She said, well, that's our imam, which is like the Muslim leader, religious leader, said that it's haram, it's not allowed. Right? It's forbidden under Islam to take it, and it would be recognized in the Jewish state if we did. So I said, okay, that's a choice you're making now. Right? Don't blame me for that. I'm a rabbi, I'll have a great religious conversation with your imam, but I'm not an expert in Muslim law, or know any Muslim law for that matter. So I can't really speak to that. But that's what life is like. I think for many Palestinian Arabs, I think if given the choice without the social stigma, I think they would take citizenship, because it would just make their lives so much better. Nir Barakat, I'm not sure if this was a good move on his part or a jerk move on his part. He's the mayor of Jerusalem now, but there's elections in a week. So in a week he becomes a lame duck. Right? He's not running for re-election. And he announced that what he wants to do is get rid of UNRWA, UN Relief Works Agency, which is the agency that deals with Palestinians who consider themselves refugees, and the United Nations considers themselves refugees, and they are the ones that provide services to everybody in East Jerusalem. So he wants to get rid of them and take over all health, education, municipal services for everybody in the Jerusalem neighborhood, Arab, Jew, everybody. Right? That's his new plan. Of course, he won't be the mayor when it comes time to fulfill his plan, so I'm not really sure what's happening. But that's what he said. He said, we've worked it out in the in the Jerusalem City Council that we can afford this and we want to do this. So life would, if that happens, right? So whether you're a citizen or not, you'll be getting the benefits of Israeli citizenship by living in Jerusalem. Should be great. So I hope I addressed all your points. I think so. Okay, good. Yes?
So kind of having to do with that, what do you think of UNRWA and what do you think of the U.S. decision to defund it?
I think UNRWA is a horrible, horrible institution. I think that the idea of UNRWA is great. I think that the idea of helping people is a wonderful idea. I don't think it's good when you embezzle funds, hide Hamas rockets in your schools, and then say, oh, I didn't know, right? I've been a principal of a school, I've been in administration, and I can tell you that if somebody was hiding rockets in my school, I'd know. I don't think it's good when you print textbooks that talk about hate for the Jewish people. I don't think these are good. So UNRWA is a horrible organization, which is why the United States decided to defund it, which makes sense. I think the United States would refund it in an instant if they could take proper reforms. But they've already said that they're not ready to reform, and I hope they get thrown out of Israel. I really, really hope so, and I hope the United Nations makes a decision on their own to end this horrible program. That's what I hope.
We're out of time. Thank you so much for speaking.
Thank you for having me. Okay. That's it.
And if you didn't sign in, please sign in as you leave. Thank you.